Morning. Thank you all for attending the 8th annual Startup Boston Week. My name is Elena, and I will be your hostess with the mostest today. And for this session, a huge thank you again to Suffolk University's Sawyer Business School for hosting this conference. As many of you may have noticed during arriving, this downtown location is really the perfect hub for exploring Boston's innovation ecosystem and learning from our industry leaders. The goal behind Startup Boston Week is to connect the entire greater Boston and New England startup community, all industries, all startup departments, and all bootstrapped and funding stages for 5 straight days of learning and connecting with one another. The team that creates Startup Boston Week is primarily volunteer, and the folks working the conference today are here volunteering their time as well. So thank you all. And thank you all for attending this conference. It's a labor of love. We really appreciate you playing a role in shaping our startup community. Thank you so much again for attending Startup Boston Week. This session is Deliberations, Exploring Careers in Legal Tech. So without further ado, I will pass it along to our moderator and we will kick things off. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I love the fact I'm actually wearing the exact same outfit as the photo. Now, that was taken last year, so I think that kind of speaks volumes. I am Professor McCoy, and I will be the moderator. And I think what I would like to do first is turn it over to our panelists and give them an opportunity to introduce themselves. So, Flo, right next to me, right?
Yep.
You're Ashley. Where's
Yeah,
Flo?
I'm Flo.
Would you please just give us about 60 seconds? Tell us about yourself. And
Yes, hi, I'm Flo Nicholas. Graduated law school back in 2005. I know I look cuter and younger. So, but after graduating law school, practiced bankruptcy. And from there, I just didn't, want to really deal with clients anymore. So I went corporate and spent about 7.5 years in corporate technology operations for one of the biggest wireless companies in the United States. With that corporate role, I was on the business side, but legal was my AKA cost center, as some people would say. So I would have to work and partner with my legal team while overseeing the multi-million-dollar modifications to the towers. From there, I've done several career pivots. I've done a little bit of legal technology, worked for a woman named Laura Frederick, who does contracts training for lawyers. And now, leveraging my law degree, the Biden and Harris administration selected or designated 31 tech hubs across the United States. New Hampshire, my home state, is one of those tech hubs, and we're known as the biofabrication industry. So I was able to secure a role in that tech hub as the Chief Impact and Community Engagement Officer. So I'll be doing a lot of data analytics, which you might be like, lawyer, data analytics. Mm-hmm. Trust me, it makes sense.
Well, thank you very much. So Ashley, if you'd like take 60 seconds.
Yeah, of course. My name is Ashley Jones. I graduated from New England Law, not too far from here, in 2018. I feel really nostalgic being back at Suffolk. Last time I was here is for a mock trial competition. And now, just by saying that, you can see the career pivots I've done, because now I work for a legal tech vendor, Link Squares. After graduating law school, I did start out in the nonprofit sector. And then I quickly reached burnout and ventured into the dark side of corporate. And I've been working in the tech sphere for a little over 6 years now. I started in financial technology and then pivoted to legal tech, where I get the best of both worlds, exploring my creative side and providing product feedback and really working with a company on all levels, as well as still wearing that same legal hat, negotiating agreements and working to assist in making a product better and making my life easier in interim, as well as other legal members of the community.
Thank you very much. So finally, we have Cara Peterson. Cara.
Hi, everybody. I'm Cara Peterson. I am the co-founder excuse me, of Describe.ai, which is about a year old justice technology company founded right here in Boston. My closest brush to law school was actually working in this building as the marketing director back in about 2005 or so. So I'm actually not an attorney. I'm the only non-attorney here. So I can talk a little bit about legal tech from the marketing perspective. So we are a free service that provides case law research. It's an alternative to the big players. And in my real job, I work at the Museum of Science. I work on marketing there. And I've been in public health communications and higher ed for most of my career. And so I do credit Suffolk University Law School in some ways of planting this seed, because I think everybody who's here knows how progressive and forward-thinking this school has always been in terms of legal technology. So it's really fun to be back here to talk about it. So thank you.
Thank you very much. So without further ado, I'd like to address this first question, if it's okay, to specific panelists. And this I would like to address to Flo. What is legal tech and how does it intersect with the legal industry?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it depends on who you ask. Like
I'm asking you.
yeah. Well, and again, my answer stays the same. And I hate to answer like a lawyer and say essentially it depends, but when you look at, I guess, the standard definition, when we look at legal technology, is really that software and tech that's being used to help lawyers do their day-to-day. Things have drastically changed because when I was, a young little lawyer and working for a law firm that heavily did litigation, we used software that pretty much helped us with e-discovery. So instead of, sorting boxes and boxes of cases, you would have essentially a legal technology company that would scan all those documents into a software. And then it made it easy for me to help my boss to search for evidence, because now I can essentially type in and do a search based on keywords versus opening boxes after boxes after boxes. So in simple lay terms, legal technology right now is essentially the legal tools, whether it's like automation that's being used to help lawyers do their day-to-day. There's this notion of why do repetitive, mundane tasks when you can leverage technologies like artificial intelligence, for example. Now, there are different categories when you say legal tech, right? It's the same thing as saying I'm a doctor. Well, it's like, well, what type of doctor? Because you have legal technology software like Link Squares that's going to work on contract management, helping with contract negotiations. And you're going to have legal technology solutions that are going to be helping with billing, making it easier for you to bill your clients, making it easier for you to track billable hours. And then, excuse me, I mentioned e-discovery earlier. There's some tools that I've worked. So it just depends. There's so many tools right now on the market, but at the end of the day, the premises of legal tech is essentially solutions that are helping, I shouldn't just say lawyers, because I should say legal professions, because I was on the business side of the house and when I was in corporate, and we did use essentially legal technology tools to help us manage our contracts with our vendors and our projects as well. So in a nutshell, that is the simplest way for me to describe what legal technology is.
I think I found, so I'm obviously a lot older, and when I was young, phones were phones, which is probably not something that young people understand, right? And on this is everything that I do, all of my banking, all of my contacts, everything. And so I always tell my students, set your password, because if your password's set, then the police have to get a search warrant if they want to get into your phone. And it's a very simple thing to do, it's set your password. But that's a great example of legal tech and how it's changed even for lay people, their interaction with the police and their interaction with the courts, right? So thought that was a kind of an interesting little aside.
I think everybody's locking their phones right now.
You'd be amazed. It seems like a silly thing, but you really should have it. If it's Apple's fantastic. And if it's password protected, no one's getting in it. And if they want to get in it, they're going to have to get a search warrant. So I think I want to apply this one to Cara Peterson. And Cara, what are some key roles and career paths available to students who are interested in legal tech, both in law firms, but in your case, legal tech companies?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one thing I would add to when we think about what legal tech is, there's this little subset that's a little bit less well known, but there's a lot of really exciting growth happening in this space, and we call that justice tech. So the difference there is there are organizations, and I will shamelessly plug one in a moment if that's okay, that are working on that end of the market, which is really about access to justice technologies, because as everyone knows, there's this incredible gap in people who need legal information or legal services and people who can actually access it. So anyone who listened to the panel yesterday heard a lot about that as well from Professor Tenenbaum and Dean Perlman. So there are opportunities to get involved in all different parts of the field. And as I said before, I am not an attorney. So I think sometimes when people think about legal technology and getting involved in this space, they kind of assume that they have to be an attorney to get started. And that's not true. You obviously have to have attorneys involved very heavily, in an area like this. But you can bring a very different perspective to this space if you aren't actually trained in the law, because a lot of what happens in that space is very tradition-based and has been very similar for a long, long time. So having people come from a fresh perspective is actually really helpful. So there's all different kinds of roles in legal tech. And one of the things that we talk about at the Museum of Science, and I know this is a bit of a stretch, but we talk about space exploration, right? And when you think about space exploration, you think, well, gee, that's being an astronaut or, driving the rocket ship. But there's also other people, once we finally do go to Mars, that are going to have to cook the food and, take care of the kids and do all the other things. So legal tech's not that different. Yes, there's people who are going to have to make sure the compliance is there and do the legal work that's there, but there are people who are going to have to market the tools. There are people who are going to have to work in the accounting. So it's a really, really exciting and growing area that I think is open to all sorts of different people. So, and they're the shameless plug, if it's okay, if you're interested in the justice tech side of things, there's a great group called the Justice Technology Association, which is just a membership organization, and the different companies in the country and some that are from abroad that are working in this space are part of that group and share really interesting information if you're interested in that space.
So my next question is for Ashley. And what resources or programs are available to help students prepare for careers in legal tech? Are there internships, mentorship opportunities, or specialized courses, and what would you recommend?
Yeah, I think to start off, each student needs to understand or be able to explore what their interest is in legal tech, if it's more legal side, if it's tech focused, if it's marketing, if it's operations, to kind of find your niche and where your interest lies. And then there are tons of courses throughout Suffolk, throughout other schools, where you can dive deeper into those specific focuses. So, I always recommend any intellectual property courses to anyone who's interested in that intersection between legal and tech, so you can understand the protections and the rights involved there. But also, there are so many legal tech vendors out there that put on tons of great programming that is often free and available through their websites that I cannot recommend enough times for people to go into and to check it out, especially if you've got that underlying interest. You're going to be able to get a better idea of what it actually looks like to be someone who represents a legal tech company, whether that's on the legal side, marketing, operations. You'll be able to get that detailed lens view into what the company's doing and what part you could potentially play in something like that. And a lot of the tech vendors, the specific individuals working for them, are always going to be open to mentorships or providing guidance or information. I always recommend using LinkedIn and sending the message. Don't be afraid to send the message. The worst thing that can happen is you don't get a response. So at least you're putting yourself out there. There's also the International Legal Technology Association. which is a great online resource. They also they also have a mentorship program where you can sign up to be a mentee or a mentor depending on where you are in your career, and then you have like a guided touch point to really help you facilitate and navigate your career path. Also, feel free to send me a LinkedIn message. Always happy to help.
Fantastic. So this question I'd like to open up to all three panelists and whoever would like to jump in first. What are some current trends and challenges shaping the legal tech industry, and how can folks stay informed and adaptable in this rapidly evolving field?
I think that's a challenge, right? It's a field that's rapidly adapting, evolving, and especially with AI, one of the things that I'm seeing a lot, and to Ashley's point, yes, be on LinkedIn, follow legal tech gurus, where there are so many of them, and that's what they do all day is post about legal tech and provide free resources. But I think one of the things I see most common right now is the impact of AI. Like AI has been around for a long time, but it just, we're seeing that new revolution of AI right now. And we've seen lawyers who've gotten in trouble using Chat GPT to write, what was it, a motion or something, and it made up case law that was
Didn't exist.
It didn't exist. And the opposing side was like, I can't find this case, this is not. So it's stuff like that, of the technology competency of legal professions using this new technology, and the need to ensure that you audit the technology before you use it. And we're starting to see an influx of states that are imposing laws that hold essentially vendors and users accountable, for using these technologies. So as lawyers or legal professionals, when you're using these technologies, one of the biggest things is, how do you protect your clients? So we're seeing data privacy issues that are coming up, right? With Chat GPT, we know with OpenAI, they made it clear that unless you shut off in the data selection to say, don't use my data to train the model, the AI model, then they're essentially taking whatever you're typing in and they're using it to train the model. And we've seen engineers and other companies have their employees get in trouble because they're dumping in trade secrets and codes into the AI software, and then somebody else gets a hold of it. So I think that's one of the challenges. While the technology is amazing and it's great and there's so many benefits, there are also the risks. So now managing the risks has now become an issue. So now we're starting to see also, when we talk about legal tech roles opening up, we're seeing risk management roles, right, that are coming up. Yeah, the need for someone who is going to be auditing, the AI. So that's right now what I see is the biggest challenge. How do we compete with the EU, who've already put in place AI regulation, and we're behind, right? We've created frameworks of what we think should be done, but we haven't really created the actual full guidance of, essentially getting ish done, right? To make sure we're protecting users, clients, and holding people accountable when the AI is faulty, for example.
That's a really great point you made about, kind of being behind the 8 ball when it comes to AI regulations, especially being behind the EU, and having to take that into consideration when you are reviewing the utilization of a new legal tech product or product enhancements, or how you market the product, and being very wary and conscious as like the legal counterpart, to know that since we don't have those regulations out, when they do come out, things could change. So we have to be adaptable and in the know, like following those legal tech gurus, making sure we're keeping up on like the latest compliance laws, the latest trends, so that when something does potentially change, we don't feel like we've got to reinvent the wheel and do a complete 360 pivot. So we're making those marginal adjustments to how we view legal tech as things transpire. It's really important.
Yeah, and I would add a really interesting part of this conversation right now actually relates to how legal tech can actually enable non-lawyers to do some legal tasks. So that's a very fraught idea. And there's a concept, obviously of the unauthorized practice of law. And it's a really, really interesting conversation that's happening right now in the legal tech space is where does legal information stop and legal advice start, right? So anybody in that space knows that that's a really important delineation. But in some states, Texas, believe it or not, just passed something about this recently, where there's kind of what you call in public health, like community health workers are kind of, similar like community justice workers. So there's this movement happening where there would be, they wouldn't have to be attorneys, but they could do some layer of some of the simpler legal tasks. And when you think about the kind of things that legal tech can enable, that especially AI, that aligns perfectly because we know if we want people who need legal services in this country to actually receive what they need, it's not going to happen only by, attorneys, because that's just the cost barriers too high. So where there's some really interesting conversations is how can these technologies both serve the attorneys, of course, legal professionals, but also consumers, and where some of the most interesting work is happening. My company does not do this, but where some of the most interesting work is happening is actually the direct to consumer space. So this is where, for example, you have a traffic stop and there's an app on your phone. There's people who are doing really interesting work with body cams and people's rights and things like that. So things that are in the moment or that can help people navigate these really sticky situations where they often are on their own or they can't they don't really know where to go. So I think that's where it's really going out to the edges of what's interesting and where that's going to be the big revolution.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think there's also that caution of people just going to Chat GPT. There's a big push in the legal industry to say Chat GPT is not a legal tool. So if you do want to do legal research, you should be seeking tools that are specifically legal tools, because then they'll have the right case law, not the made up case law. So I think that's where the distinction is, and where we're saying people using that case of that lawyer who got in trouble to say, this is why lawyers should be more focused on going to legal tech companies that are developing tools that are specifically for legal professionals, because they're going to get the right information, versus the wrong information. Now, not to say there's a guarantee that the information that you're going to get from the legal tech tool is going to be 100% perfect. But just to your point, is there is that, talk within the legal industry about that.
I'm present company excluded. Lawyers are the least technical of any profession. That's at least my own experience. And the courts, COVID really changed everything. Now, the federal court, you could always use the PACER and file online.
Right.
But now the state courts, and I came up to this just in the last year, you can do pleadings and filings. So it's a paper intensive profession. And so I'm a Gen Xer and I'm older. Most judges are from the baby boomer generation or older. They're moderately clueless about technology. And that seems to be, it's an interesting thing. As legal tech, I think, grows, what it's going to have to do is bring this profession that is the least technological, and they're almost technologically adverse. I mean, I know lawyers that can't even use a computer, and I'm not kidding. It's going to be a very difficult challenge to sort of transition to it. So fantastic. I want to ask this of Cara, because it's a very specific question of what you do. What are the key differences in the startup journey for legal tech ventures compared to other tech startups? You're in that space.
Yeah, and you just kind of hinted at the question. So one of my favorite stories that I tell is when I was in higher ed and I was doing communications before Suffolk, and this is no shade at Suffolk, I love Suffolk. I was at an engineering school at BU. So with the engineers, you would say, let's try it. What could go wrong? And they'd say, yeah, let's try it. What could go wrong? And then you come to work with the lawyers, and it was a pretty big change for me because, you'd say, let's try it. What could go wrong? And they'd say, oh yeah, what could go wrong? So it was a very different reaction, right? So you're exactly right that lawyers, because of the risk aversion, which is absolutely appropriate in the field, it is less likely that you're going to have a lot of sort of leading edge case. That's why what Suffolk does is really interesting, because it's always been out there. But on the other hand, what we're seeing as we go out there is that pretty much everybody involved in the legal system knows it isn't working the way it should. And so there are a lot of judges in particular that we've spoken to who have a lot of time. They've spent a lot of time with pro se litigants and helping them navigate, and they know that the system needs to change. And so I think there's hope, and I think there's a really feeling that some of these tools could come in and change things, but it's a slow place to change. And so it's kind of funny when you think about it. It's like, gee, what would be a better, environment to go into as an entrepreneur with this new tool that everyone's afraid of than legal. Is you couldn't pick a harder probably market to change. But I do think because there's so much unmet need, there's such a huge latent market in legal services and legal information that the opportunity kind of outweighs the hesitation. And back to what Flo was talking about the hallucinated cases, which were really made a lot of news when this first came out. What I noticed at first is there was a lot of, at first, when this news kind of first started coming out, was, this is why we can't use it. This is why we can't use it in law. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. But that has kind of gone away now, and it's started to be more what she was saying about finding solutions that will identify those problems and if something is wrong and hallucinated. So it's interesting because there was a moment there where it felt like maybe everyone was just going to throw that baby right out with the bathwater. So it's a very highly regulated environment. The stakes are really high for attorneys who are using these things for their clients. But there's also just such pressing need that it's a very unique ecosystem, I think.
I think also to both of your points, also trying to bridge the gap between the need and the technological understanding, because I feel like a lot of attorneys, they want to understand how the tech is working and being used, but then you try to go down that rabbit hole and it becomes, well, this is too much. I don't understand what you're talking about. I know I need the solution, but I'm not sure how we're getting to the solution. So being able to adjust the talk tracks and be able to speak both languages a little bit is also one of the hurdles, but also benefits of working in this sphere, is being able to toggle both of those.
Yeah, and I think part of it too is the implementation, right? It's not like a plug and go in most cases. There are some where it can take several months working with a legal tech vendor and the organization to actually implement the technology. So a lot of people, I think part of it, as lawyers and even legal professionals, even somebody who worked in corporate, everything was productivity. Everything was results. Everything was that you have the contract signed. And so there's that fear element of if we start trying to use the tools, because the data shows that a lot of law firms and a lot of companies have the budgets and want to invest in the technology. But the data also shows is that the implementation of the technology is actually low. So there's, it's like, what's going on? You want to use it, but then you're not using it. But I think part of it comes down to that is the time it takes to implement and the fear of we're going to upset our clients, we're going to lose our clients, and everything is, with, especially if you're coming from a law firm that's super busy, everything is billable hours. There is a fear of disruption of the day-to-day that we're doing. So I think it's a thing of how do we convince that, no, we're actually going to increase your productivity. So that's why you should implement it. So those are some of the kind of back and forth debates that are happening.
Right. And making a mistake in this space, if you're an attorney and you make a mistake with something that you're doing for a client, that's a really, really big deal. Right. And it's similar to maybe in healthcare, if you're using this for, like scanning mammograms or something, like those are really high cost mistakes. Right. So the tools have to be at such a high level. But probably where this is going to go is that there will be a whole new layer of professionals and firms and corporate places and things like that that are the ones who know how to interact with this technology really well and are able to inform and work with the attorneys who will then rely on that. So it's kind of like a paralegal extension or a specialist in this space. So that's probably going to be a whole new job that
Legal
ends up.
operations.
Yeah,
We're already seeing that.
We've already seen it.
Yeah, and some of the titles are also business titles, right? In some of these legal technology companies. So it's not necessarily CTO. You're not going to see someone with a technology, but I'm seeing lawyers who are working at legal technology companies who are CFOs. Alex Sue is a great example of one. I think prior to him going into another legal tech company, he was at this one of the biggest legal technology companies, alongside with yours, of course, not downplaying yours. And he had a community, was like a chief community engagement or somewhere type of that role. And now he's a CFO. So it goes back to what I said earlier about how with the risks and the audit that's needed, you're also seeing the roles for risk management, right? And we're also seeing, we were talking, one of the CEO of Link Square is back there, so I'm staring at him. But we also talked about data scientists that are being hired who are working for these legal technology companies because they're being tasked with helping create some of these like AI tools and algorithms that help them build their tools. Like, okay, hey, I want my software to be able to track, XYZ in my contracts and manage my contracts in this XYZ way. So yeah, it's really fascinating what's going on in the legal technology sector. The other thing I'm hearing is also, when you ask me about the definition of legal tech, is originally when COVID happened and everybody had to figure out solutions of, we've got to continue, otherwise our law firms are going to go out of business. We now all of a sudden started seeing this big emphasis of the legal tech sector, which actually has been around for a very long time, because I've been using those solutions back in 2005. But I think one of the things that has also happened is it's not just lawyers that are using these tools, right? We're seeing paralegals that are using the tools. We're also seeing people who have business titles, right? The business team selling a product will send a contract to legal, but they want to know, okay, who in legal is assigned to that contract and how long is it taking them to review that contract? When I was in corporate, I didn't have that. I had to email my legal person and I had to create an Excel spreadsheet that would help me track my vendors and that would help me track, like, okay, I sent the contract to legal 20 days ago. Why is it taking so long? Then I'd have to email back my legal person and say, hey, where's this contract? I need to close. But now you don't need that if you're using legal tech, because you're going to have a dashboard, right? And it's going to say, hey, this legal person, it takes them 20 days to review their contracts, but this legal person, it takes them 3. So not only can that tool now help the legal department assess their bandwidth and assess their performance management of their team, but me as a business person on the business side of the house, I can now track to see where my stuff is. And then either maybe it's on me, I'm blaming legal, but I'm the one who's at fault. So that's where with legal technology, it's not just legal professionals anymore who are using these tools. It's also the business professionals that have to work with the legal team that are utilizing these solutions so that they can, essentially everyone can be proficient and efficient for the organization. Because now it's about the organization's needs, not just the legal team, but the organization.
And you brought up dashboards, and it also brings me back to you mentioning legal being a cost center earlier, which is something I hear all the time. But I mean, think about legal tech and its ability to combat that, being that legal is a cost center. It's a really, really big task and challenge that firms and companies have that are not utilizing legal tech. So when we are in a situation where a contract has been sitting with legal for 20 days and someone's following up, not sure who to follow up with. But what they're not seeing is that legal person probably got 20 or 30 other contracts out the door within that same time frame, and maybe there's a queue, and maybe they're just working down through that. But if you're using, Excel sheets, or you're tracking things through email, you don't have that data readily available to you to be able to speak to the business about that, to make a case. Maybe you need another additional headcount on the business team, the legal team, your sales or finance team, and you don't have the data to back that up. That's a really challenging place that I've personally been in. So I think legal tech bridges that gap and creates that more holistic view where, as Flo mentioned, the company's working together as the company for the company. Legal's not working for legal, despite what some people think of us, but using legal tech to really bridge that gap and create that holistic viewpoint is really important, and it takes much more than legal to do so.
I just had a sort of an epiphany sitting here. I had a federal case. It was an interpleader case, and there was a U.S. attorney in Washington and two other lawyers, one that was in like Fall River and one in North Shore. And none of us ever stepped one foot in the courtroom. And it was about 7 months and the case settled, but every single hearing was on Zoom. All of the communications were either by phone or by email. We never once were in the same place in the same room. I never met these attorneys other than, talking to them either over the phone or by email, communicating. That's for the courts. That's a sea change. I'm older. That never was the case. You needed to appear. It's called filing an appearance. And we never appeared. We just did Zoom. I think with courts and universities, COVID kicked them into Zoom, and they're never coming back. Like they're not getting, they realize, wow, we can do this, right? We could, you exactly do the same exact thing. And it makes total sense. Like, why have everybody travel for a hearing when you could do it on Zoom, and people can be from Washington and they could be from California, and you can get the same resolution. Very powerful thing. Okay, so this next question is for Ashley, and this is kind of following up. And the reason I thought you would be perfect for this is you hinted to it. What resources, such as online platforms, professional organizations, or events, can students use to stay updated and engaged in the legal tech community?
Yeah, I'd like to say for everyone in the room, this is the great first step, if not your second or third or fourth step. Being a part of conversations and panels like this is really huge because you get to hear from some more real-time, real-world examples. As I mentioned, ILTA before, but also legal ops is also something you should be tracking on LinkedIn and through various conferences and platforms. Concero is a great one. They do legal ops all over the country several times a year. Clock, yes. Clock is a huge one. Every year in...
You have to probably say exactly what it means. Like consortium, legal operations console.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's every year in Vegas, I believe, in May.
And Legal Week in New York.
Legal Week, New York. Yeah, tons of great conferences and things to tap into, because a lot of them will do what Startup Boston Week is doing, and that is streaming sessions while they're also hosting them live. So there's no need to have to travel to some of these events. You're still being able to tap in and get to the connections you want. Also, just even looking at the lineups that they have for the sessions and reading some of those bios gives you a good frame of mind of who to tap into, or like what else is out there, because everyone, just on our panel alone, we've got 3 very different career tracks and how we've gotten to this seat on the panel. And I think just diversifying who you come into contact with and the things that you're tracking on a daily basis, even through just like your LinkedIn hashtags or anything like that, just keeping the resources fresh and new, and not being afraid to dive into something that maybe doesn't track well with you right now, but you could meet someone, you could hear that magical tidbit that gives you that career highlight or spark that you want to be able to follow into something else. And I think I'd also say just not being afraid to pivot. I think whether you're pivoting from a specific course in school, pivoting from a career role, don't be afraid to do so, because some of those pivots lead to the most magical decisions in career moments. Like as I said last time I was at Suffolk, I was doing a mock trial competition, and then I followed that up with clerkship and doing some work at the DA's office. And then I was like, I don't know if this is for me. I made that pivot to nonprofit. I pivoted again to technology. And now I am as happy as I can be, feeling like I'm being challenged in all the right ways and feeling like holistically comfortable in my career, which is something that not a lot of people unfortunately get to experience. So don't be afraid to pivot, for sure.
And I will caution just a little bit is to first determine whether you want to go the route of practice or whether you just want to leverage your legal degree for higher opportunities, C-suite opportunities. And the reason why I say that is that there are some people who pivot into a business role and they don't practice, right? And trying to then transition back and to practice, what happens is, even let's say your business role, you were doing some contracts drafting or reviewing and working with the legal team, your title is still considered by some standards with some organizations, a business title. And there are some organizations that will say, we count legal experience. And your title was not a legal title. Your title was a business experience. Therefore, the 7.5 years, yeah, you did amazing work. You negotiated some great deals and you worked with legal, but you weren't legal. So your 7.5 years experience, when we're counting it towards you applying for a senior legal role, you have 0 experience. And I know this for a fact because it happened to me. Right. So you really, and that's why I caution people is decide, what do I want to do? If I want to practice, then you want to make sure you go the route of practicing. If I just want to leverage my legal degree and explore other opportunities, have no intention of practicing, then that's cool. But be careful which route you take.
Right. And one other thing quickly I would say is, believe it or not, there are legal tech influencers. So, which is, I know, kind of strange, and they're all on LinkedIn, which is really funny. I'm sure to a lot of people who don't really go on LinkedIn a lot, but there are people who are gathering up all this information already and sharing all the great resources and the different conferences and all that. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I can recommend some folks, but
Alex Sue.
Yeah, Alex Sue. There's definitely people, and there's a fair number of them from this area.
Yeah. Colin Levy is from this area.
Mm-hmm.
So I tried to get him here, but
Yeah.
it was busy.
So what I'd like to do right now is open it up to the audience for questions for our panelists. So please feel free if you have specific questions. Here we go. There's a mic.
Thank you, guys. First of all, this was incredibly informative. You have a wealth of experience, and being able to hear from you guys has really opened up a lot of doors. My name is Tamim. I'm a principal software engineer. I've been in Boston for 7 years, and I've been really passionate about being a lawyer in the past. And I think I realized that there is potential to bridge my experience with AI and backend algorithms with potentially finding a founder. Mm-hmm. And so I hope this question is relevant for folks, but as somebody who is quite technical and is interested in startups and even the legal space, what resources specifically would there be for someone like myself who doesn't have an understanding as to how the legal processes work, but is motivated and capable of building a system that would bring innovation to the industry?
The gentleman sitting behind you is an engineer, and he's now CEO of a legal technology company. So that right there is a great example of how you can be an engineer and create a company. But the biggest thing I can say, going back to what Ashley said, is there's a wealth of companies on LinkedIn that are legal technology companies. And a lot of them are always hiring people who have that technology expertise, because it's not the lawyers that are actually sitting there building the stuff. No, we hire people like you, right, to do that for us. So you don't have to know, contract terms and stuff like that. But what I need you to do is work with me to help me, create, the software that's going to do X, Y, and Z. So I wouldn't let that fact that you don't have the legal degree be a hindrance, because it has nothing to do with it. Your area of expertise in actually building the system or offering ideas of how to enhance the system, that's what's needed.
And if you're in particularly interested in AI, there's a lot of AI groups in Boston that are working very well together. And I can tell you about this blue bracelet later. It's a group called the AI Blueprint for Massachusetts, and there's a lot of energy around people getting together and working on problems. And there are a subset of us that are legal tech people. So,
And I think as long as you just maintain that passion of wanting to consistently help solve the problem or identify the problem, that's really huge. Because I, for one, love when someone from our data science or legal engineering team comes and asks me a question to gain a better understanding, because it shows that passion and that want to assist and work collaboratively. So I think just maintaining that openness is going to take you much farther than you realize.
Hey, thank you for being here at the panel. My name's Sean, and I had the opportunity to work with several compliance, dispute resolution firms, IP litigation, all types of those firms in my previous life as an investment banker. So a question I've got for all of you is, you talk about the tradition of the legal industry and based on precedent and the issues if there is any type of mistake that goes and gets sent out. So when you're working as a legal startup, how do you go about building and earning that initial trust with the marketplace when there is just so much riding, and the what if something breaks is a much more difficult question than in other verticals?
I'm happy to take that from a startup perspective. So you start with the best engineering you can possibly have, because and this is not meant as shade, but a lot of the legal tech companies are kind of self-taught lawyers who've taught themselves to program, which is great and all that, but starting with engineers and people who are actually the data scientist types, it's really, you're going to get a better product. And then quickly fill your board of advisors with legal academics, which is what we did. So we have Megan Ma from Stanford Law, we have Daza Greenwood from MIT, and a couple legal librarians who are basically worth their weight in gold, and people don't necessarily always know that. So to legitimize yourself, and this is a journey we took very much. We had exactly this journey, is everybody and their dog walker's cousin's friend has a legal tech startup right now, right? So it's like, how is the marketplace supposed to differentiate, especially a marketplace that's so risk averse? So it's getting involved in the community, earning the trust, and having trusted voices, whether they're advisors or journalists. Bob Ambrogi is like the biggest legal tech journalist in the country, and he's here in Boston. So you have to start to earn your reputation the old-fashioned way, really.
Yeah, so I'm a former founder of a startup. Actually did Techstars Atlanta last year when I was a COO of that company. And one of the things that we had to do, because it's like, when you're creating a software, because it was a software company, when you're creating a software, you could spend the rest of your life creating that software. But at the end of the day, you got to get people in there actually utilizing the software. And one of the things we were taught is there's going to be mistakes. Your software is not going to just be from jump, day one, going to be the best thing ever. No, you're going to have mistakes. So what we had to do was create a you essentially ask people to get in your software, and you give them like a trial, whether it's like, 1 month, 3 months, and you're just like, hey, I just want you to play around with it. I want you to put your data in it, because we got to figure out where the bugs are. Because there's only so many bugs your engineers are going to find, right? It's like, until people are actually using the software is when you're like, oh, snap, this is horrible. Like, we got to start all over again. But that's how you build that trust with people, is that you get people to start using it. They work with you, and they can also be a design partner. We actually signed a design partnership with an organization here in Massachusetts, which actually oversees attorneys. So you got to build those relationships, like she said, being in the community, but you've got to get people to use the software and create those partnerships that say, help us make and improve our software. And you offer them that discount or you offer them that free trial. And then from there, you just fix it and until it gets better. And again, there is no 100% perfect software. We've seen it, right? Remember that day when the world kind of shut down a little bit because of one software update that killed everybody's system?
Mhm.
Yeah. So as you can tell, technology is not perfect.
Yeah, and to really kind of piggyback off of what Cara was saying, it's not just about the relationships, it's also about making the right hiring decisions and partnering decisions, because those two don't always match. And I spent a chunk of time advising startup companies, and the first thing we would talk about was, you want to hire someone, so tell me why you need this person. And no, but tell me like every single thing that you expect this person to do. And you had to challenge them constantly to really think beyond title and experience on paper, because like when you're a startup company, you want to hire people who are going to rise with you to be able to handle those challenges, who see your vision and are able to execute upon it. And I think I wouldn't, for lack of better words, lazy hiring or hiring that doesn't have a lot of thought behind it just to fill the role is one of the probably worst mistakes a startup can make, especially in the legal tech sphere.
Oh, there's somebody in the
Over
front.
here, question.
Thanks. Hi, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about legal tech today. I was wondering if there's currently a software giant in the legal tech space. For example, sales has Salesforce, marketing has HubSpot, in HR we have Workday.
Mhm.
So just wondering if there's something like that where all of legal ops is happening in the legal tech space.
There's been a couple of
That's a
mergers
loaded question,
lately.
Yeah. It's a very fast-paced moving industry right now. When I
Be
think,
careful, your boss is over there.
I
how you
know.
answer.
I know. Link Square
You
is
say
number
your
one.
company.
I know. when I think of some of the juggernauts, they're kind of in different spheres, and we're all trying to capitalize on our niche, to build upon it, and to just meet the needs of the legal profession, the legal operations, business operations. So when I think of who's at the forefront, I mean, Link Squares, but I definitely think when looking at that, when you just do a search for legal tech on LinkedIn, and you'll see the top heavy hitters will pop up. But search for Link Squares too.
Yeah, I'll have to say, because so I have a friend who's a co-founder, and sorry, they went to Harvard Law, and they created a software. It's called Eversort. That's one. There's another one which I keep mentioning, Alex Su. Alex Su came from Eversort, and then he went to Ironclad. And again, there's different, because again, as I mentioned earlier, legal tech is so vast, right? There are solutions that are just based for contracts.
Mhm.
And then there are solutions that are based for e-discovery. So when you go into like the e-discovery realm, you have a whole different ranking, right? So that's why it's kind of hard to answer, because, it's like trying to get a car ranking, right? You have small size, mid size, you have luxury, affordable, so to her point, I think the best thing is you kind of have to understand, well, which software exactly are you talking about? Because there's vast out there. And then the other thing too is when you look at rankings online, you get vast opinions, So, but from what I've seen, those are the two companies, because I just know them. They seem to have more of a presence. And Link Squares, of course. The CEO's looking at me over there. But I would just say, is do your research, because they all do different things. Some focus on contracts and vendor management and project management. So
Yeah.
that is true.
That's true.
Yeah.
Thomson Reuters, they do a lot of things, offer management type
Mhm.
Yeah.
Some of these companies are like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was,
What about LexisNexis?
Yeah.
LexisNexis?
yeah, that,
Westlaw, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. those are
right,
big
that's,
ones.
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, people online probably can't hear the audience, but someone was talking about Thomson Reuters and LexisNexis. And so what is really important to understand about the legal tech market is especially related to legal research. It is a functioning duopoly right now and has been for a long, long time. And so a lot of the energy in the market is challenging those two gigantic companies, Thomson Reuters, Westlaw, and LexisNexis. And what tends to happen is, especially in legal research, is companies, startups are either purchased or put out of business. And so it is very, very typical duopoly power type space. One of the hottest brands in legal tech right now that admittedly comes with a lot of question marks because people don't really know what they're doing is called Harvey. And they just reached a unicorn status. So there's a lot of questions as to exactly what they're doing over there, but we'll see. And then, there's a whole nother conversation going on around assessing the validity and how good these tools are, because anybody can say my tool is the best thing ever, but there's some conversation about independent assessments that need to happen in the market around this. So it's absolutely a market dominated by two gigantic, old, rich, loaded with their own lawyers, companies that are doing everything to maintain
Well, it's
their
like,
position.
it's like baby formula when you have a baby and they either give you Similac or the other one, right?
Right.
So when I was
exactly.
in law school, we were trained on LexisNexis.
Right.
And then other students were trained on Westlaw. But so I've used LexisNexis 25 years now, and there's no comparison to what it was when I was in law school.
Right.
It is a phenomenal product. LexisNexis does everything. Forget about being able to do legal research.
Mhm.
It can do case management. It can give you recommended pleading. I mean, it is amazing software. And I do
extremely
not get paid by
expensive.
LexisNexis.
No, and it's very, very expensive. And that's the space that's really interesting for justice tech, because when you look at the cost of these tools, they're just absolutely out of reach for legal aid or for any other kinds of groups. So, or even solo practitioners have a hard time with it sometimes. So that's where the space in the market's really interesting. No one's going to probably very successfully challenge those companies, but if they can carve out little pieces of it and have it be more affordable, that could work.
Yeah, I will say that there are some that are affordable. There are some now, like especially if you're doing like contracts, for example, that are add-ons to your Microsoft. So those tend to be a little bit on the more affordable side. I think I probably deliberately sometimes don't mention bigger companies because as someone who's been in the startup world, I like to, shout out smaller companies. But one of the things like with software is you always have, companies that have the trials. So you're able to use them and see because, someone can use LexisNexis and think it's, the next best thing since cheese bread. And someone else can think like.
If you're a litigator, it's really
Right.
good.
Right. And speaking of litigation, there's also tools that are specifically for litigation. There are now tools that help litigators, determine, the odds of them winning a case. Right. It can sort through, prior judges' decisions and say, based on your client's case, this is most likely how this judge is going to rule. So again, that's another example of just how big this market is. But I think because it is kind of a big sea of a lot of startup companies, I think that's where you can see around in the mid-level and small level size companies are gonna have more competitive pricing, right? And because they know that, the law firm that has, one person or two people, they're not gonna be able to afford a technology that's gonna cost like, $200,000 a year, for example. They probably don't even make $200,000 a year. So I think that's where I like. So it's kind of like, for me, a double edge. I love the fact there's a lot of technology because that means competition, and competition means better pricing. But the fact that there is a lot of technology and availability, it also makes it very difficult to pick which one to use.
Right.
So. Don't
So-
be shy.
Yeah, well, so would you like me to wrap it up?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I want to say thank you to Ashley and to Flo and to Cara. And I hope that this was informative. And thank you to all three of you.
Yes. Let's give them all a big round of applause.
And thank you all for being here and listening.
Yes, thank
Yeah,
you.
Awesome
Yes.
questions.
Absolutely. Wonderful panel. Again, thank you all so much for your time. We do still have a lot more in store for you for the rest of the week. We do have a career fair kicking off tonight here at Suffolk, actually in this room at around 6 p.m. We are going to be taking just a short hiatus. We'll be back in this room with the next session at 1:15, Finding Balance, Preparing for Layoffs or Hiring Freezes in the Tech World. Feel free to pop out, get some lunch. You can also visit with some of our eco partners who are tabling up on the 5th floor in the Commons. Don't want to miss that. One thing, just want to let everybody know there are a lot of incredible perks that our sponsors of Startup Boston Week are offering you. Everything from free co-working space to legal hours and much more, as well as partnerships with local restaurants. Everybody loves to eat. Speaking of lunchtime, something for you guys to check out. So to take advantage of that, follow the URL sbw2024.startupbos.org/perks. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you back here in about 45 minutes. Connect, continue to network, and have a beautiful week. Thank you so much.
Thank you.